Greetings and welcome to Beatles Stuffology, where two old friends sit about and talk BS, Beatles stuff, on a track-by-track basis pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McQuarrie, and I'm here with my co-host Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
Hello, I'm just sitting here watching the rain come down and down. How about you?
There's actually a hint of sunshine here today, which is
Oh wow.
unlikely in Scotland, but true.
Yeah. Wow, that's quite something. Yeah. Dear listener, JG is in not just the land of Scotland, but the land of the Edinburgh Festival.
Yes.
So this is obviously a cultural highlight. He's got a studio audience in there, listening away. Hot Edinburgh ticket, no doubt.
Yes, that's right, and everything you said is true.
Hmm.
Good. Well, before we linger on this point too long, let's crack on and see what we can do with this episode's song. This episode, we are talking about She's a Woman. Good.
Yeah.
And a B-side.
Yeah, and she's a woman. That's
Yes,
good to know. Thanks for the identification there, Paul. She's a woman.
she
Yeah.
understands,
Well, there you go. There
which
you
is
go. Yeah.
which is nice.
Well, yeah. Although she's not necessarily culturally sensitive, maybe, but that's an issue, isn't it? Hey, look. This is clearly a song that those four lovable lads from Liverpool liked a lot. I wasn't planning that alliteration. I was quite pleased with that.
That was very good. Yeah.
And because they played it so often, didn't they? This is one that really entered into their live set in '65 and '66 through to being the second song played at Candlestick Park in that final concert. So clearly, it was one that they thought worked. So let's unpick why. Okay, it's a rocker. There you go. That's my contribution.
Okay, thanks for that. You are in every sense there correct. Excellent analysis. I don't know. It is a funny one. I suppose it is unusual in terms of its offbeat and all that, but I know it's. I really
I
wanted to
feel.
find something exciting to say about this one, and
Sorry,
it's tough.
sorry. No, I can't think you just can't throw in a comment like with the offbeat and all that. I'm sorry. That needs a little bit of expansion for those of us who may have seen, because if you do any reading about this song, then the whole Lennon playing on the offbeat comes up quite a lot, and I think a lot of us who don't have that musical education will just gloss over that and get to the bits that they can actually understand. So right, offbeat and all that, go.
Yeah, offbeat and all that. So instead of playing on the beat, he's playing off the beat.
So when you say on the beat,
So
what does
on the
that
beat,
mean?
so every time the drum hits, you play a chord at the same time. So you're playing on the beat. Off the beat is playing the gaps in between, essentially.
So, follow-up question. Lennon is notoriously someone who struggled with keeping time. Is this a deliberate thing, or is this just him basically being out of kilter with what's actually meant to happen?
I think we can say that this is intentional. I don't think he was so far off the beat on the beat that he slid off the beat. Even
It's
my
quite
rhythm playing isn't that bad. It's
and
that's
and it's pretty choppy as well, and I think that's why, as we'll talk about later, it becomes a popular song for covers, because it has that kind of choppy style that, from a layman's point of view, looks as though it's quite simple to replicate.
yeah, it's not particularly difficult. You need to concentrate on it a wee bit, but it's not particularly tough in any real meaningful sense. I think we can give some credit to Ringo here, who does keep everything absolutely rock steady. Of course, I'm going to give credit to Ringo. That's what I do. But fair's fair. Like, let him keeps it up throughout the song without any apparent difficulty. And when you hear the live versions, like, he can pull it off live, so it's not something which is just done for the studio and then quietly walked away. Like you said, they obviously like the song. It got constantly played. Like, McCartney was still dragging it out in the 90s. It's on the what is it, the official bootleg. So there's clearly a degree of affection from him as well. But
Yeah.
it's something that Lennon could do live. So that means something, I guess.
With reference to the McCartney thing, it's one of those when you go on secondhand songs and you look up "She's a Woman" by the Beatles. One of the acts that has covered "She's a Woman" by the Beatles the most is Paul McCartney, and you think, okay, right, maybe they need slightly different terms of reference in how they work that kind of thing out. I mean, this is. Okay, right. So let's sort of strip this back to the basics. This is, so the legend goes, basically an idea that McCartney came up with, and he was out for a walk and then brought it straight into the studio, and they finished it off, and that's about as much time as they spent on it. So it's another one of those, seemingly another one of those songs where from start to finish is, you know, a matter of let's just say hours for the sake of argument. You know, from conception to delivery, you know, it's done in a blink of a metaphorical musical moment. So, can you blink in a moment? Never mind. I think I forgot how that sentence was going to end. Anyway, never mind. So, actually, considering that, it's really, really good if you want to sort of take that context into account, and in particular because, you know, the opening couplet is you know, it's perfectly fine. It sets it up, but then once you know, he really hits the rhythm, and you then go into the lines that are a little bit pacier, a little bit punchier. It delivers something that's quite interesting. Again, who knows what it would have been like had they actually spent more time on it. Maybe they might have changed some of the lyrics. You never know, but it's pretty effective, and for a B-side, do you know what, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think lyrics is probably the main thing that would get swapped out if it was something that had a little bit more time spent on it. I mean, honestly, the construction of the song is really, really good.
Yeah.
It feels substantially different from anything else that we've covered up to this point. Not just because of the offbeat, but just the way that everything locks together. You can very easily discern each individual component of the song. But the way that they lock together is something that the band just haven't ever done up to this point. And there's a couple of things that it definitely prefigures as well, like the piano line underneath the lead melody, very much prefigures something like "Hey Bulldog," for example. So, and the way that the song is constructed, the way that the elements are kind of arranged, is very kind of come together as well. So there's a lot of kind of prefiguring going on here, and that also gives it an extra little something. There's work being done here that's going to get picked up in future. Although things like the offbeat aren't really something that are going to come back, there are plenty of other less conspicuous elements maybe that the band are going to pick up and run with further down the line. That makes it kind of interesting from a sort of historical perspective, if you want to put it that way, from the way that they build up and out from this point onwards.
So bearing in mind that you've mentioned "Hey Bulldog" and "Come Together," I presume then when you said an extra little something, you weren't referring to the song "Something."
No, not in this particular occasion.
Just thought I'd clarify, as I couldn't really see the connection there.
That's fair enough.
Myself, yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. By the way, does your love bring you presents?
Yeah, sometimes it's quite nice. Yeah, does yours?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that the cat brings me presents. The cat is quite a prolific killer of wildlife. So every morning I come down with some trepidation to see, but only one dead mouse-like creature this week. So you know, that's looking up for the wildlife around here.
Excellent. And does your love in any way consider you to be a peasant?
Yeah. Now, right, okay. So
because we have to get into this.
Well, we do, and for those of you who managed to get through the blockbuster that is the Long Tall Sally episode. I mean, I say blockbuster, nothing compared to Hard Day's Night album and film.
Absolutely.
But basically, actually, no, it wasn't Long Tall Sally. It was I think, I Feel Fine. Anyway, whatever the last one was that we recorded, that was still quite a long one. We are going to try and make this a really, really tight, shorter episode today. But we did talk about the fact that this is probably the worst rhyme in Beatles history. There will probably be something else that will spring to mind at some point, but certainly at the moment, Presents and Peasants just is evidence of the speed at which the song was written. However, bearing in mind how often they played it, they didn't think it worthy of changing. You know, at no point they thought, well, okay, do you know what? A, no one can hear us. B, I'm not really sure about that. No one's going to notice that we're not singing the original words, and hopefully no one will really care. Why don't we change it? but peasants, presents, and peasants.
Yeah, it's not great. But I also one of the reasons may simply be, you know, like for all that they enjoyed playing it, like it's a throwaway B side. It's not
Yeah,
something which has made it onto the album, so it may not simply not have been deemed worthy of spending any more time on. Like it's done, we've done it. Okay, fine. It's not the greatest piece of lyrical artistry in the world, but you know, fine, we get on with it. It's obviously popular enough to keep its
yeah.
place in the set list for the audience as well as for the band. So you
And
know,
that's probably why I'm Down was also a popular, well, popular for them live song, a song that they enjoyed playing, had fun playing. But there you go. So My Love Don't Bring Me Presents, Christmases are non-events. There you go, Paul. Throwing that one in for you. That's one that you could have had. I mean, I'll sort of throw in a few of the others as we go through the conversation. But have you got one?
yeah, well, I could give it like a 21st century spin if we wanted.
Sure.
My love don't give me presents. I like it when she consents.
Okay. Thank you very much. A little bit of politics there.
There we go. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. We don't want anything as juicy as politics to interrupt us. We have a lot in this song that challenges Mr. McCartney when it comes to the vocal range. So I think maybe having simplistic lyrics like that maybe do help quite substantially. You know, it's not something if you're concentrating on really belting it out, which obviously he does do. Having lyrics which are that simplistic does help. It makes it a really easy thing to do to be able to focus on your performance rather than on the words that you're delivering. So if we want to feel generous about the quality of the lyrics here, we could use that as a bit of a fig leaf.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And he's going for it a bit with the bass on this as well, isn't he? He's starting to really develop more sophisticated bass lines on this, which is something that I know McDonald points out as well. It's really kind of starting to say, do you know what? I'm quite good at this. Let's make it a bit louder, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've had plenty of sophisticated bass lines up till now. The difference is now we can hear them. Even though this is still Hofner vintage bass lines, you
Yeah.
know, this is much clearer. It's much further up in the mix, and some of those like early Beatles songs, there are some phenomenally complex bass lines on them, but they're just muddy. They're just hard to make out. But now we're starting to get that cohesion between the quality of the bass line and its audibility.
And do you think that maybe there's an element of look at me, Mr. Lennon, I can play something more complex than the riff to I Feel Fine and sing at the same time? Mr. Lennon, sir, leader of the band, Mr. Lennon, sir, you were there first. I am just your humble servant, Mr. Lennon, sir.
You may very well think that. I couldn't possibly comment.
Fair enough. Fair enough. That comes from I was sitting in the library before Here's a Juxtaposition before it was raining. Before nipping in to see the old Barbie movie the other day. She's a woman. She certainly is by the end of it. Anyway, and I was reading through a book of Rolling Stone interviews, and there's something about Lennon's interview. I think it was 71 in there, where he seems really bitter about the fact that this bloke James Paul McCartney came in and took over his band and. And you just think, right, okay, fair enough. But then we know, don't we, to treat a lot of the 1970s Lennon interviews with an absolute pinch of salt, because he does say some daft things that even he would probably be a little bit embarrassed about. And fun enough, I'll see if I can find it whilst yakking away. There was something that I saw someone had put on Twitter, which sort of was praising Lennon for his consistency and you always knew where you stood with him. And I sort of just thought,
well, that's
really?
bollocks.
Really? Okay.
He just made shit up to fit whatever mood he was in at the time, which is fine, but come on.
It was utterly bizarre. Or maybe it was on the gram. Anyway, yeah, I looked at that and I did have un petit chacal, because I just thought, well, yeah, that's just basic nonsense. I'm not going to find it now, and it would be unbecoming to name and shame any particular individual for making what is just a teeny mistake. But there we go, and it's being able to put something together like this and knock it out in a really sort of short period of time is kind of the epitome of that sort of early Beatles element, isn't it? It's that not wasting time, but knowing the songs that you need to spend a few hours on developing, and knowing the songs that you can just sort of knock out and they will be quote unquote good enough. And one of the things that makes them so incredibly effective.
Absolutely. And one of the things about this song is how consistently well they could play it. You know, there's a version on the Hollywood Bowl album, there's Live at the BBC. Live at the BBC version is kind of interesting because there's very little energy in it. It's very competently played, but there's not a lot of drive to it. There's not a lot of the same kind of full throttled yelp that you tend to get when McCartney does it live or even in the studio version. But it's very, very competent. Like George's little solo, like absolutely not perfect, flawless. Everybody makes sure that they hit their spots, but it's not the driver that one might hope for.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I mean, do you think that might have been when they were sort of out on tour, or I mean, I sort of wonder when that could have been, because this was recorded, I think, towards the end of the the recording sessions, because I think this was what, 27th of November, and then I think really after that they're in on the 18th of October, and then again I think about the 4th of December. So no, I've got that wrong. No, it's the release. Sorry, 8th of October. They're recording this. Then in again on the 18th, and then about the 26th of October, and then roughly they're done. So there's it's coming towards the end of the Beatles for Sale sessions. So were they heading out on the road at this time? I don't know.
I honestly don't know either, but I know one of the things with the BBC sessions is because, I mean, I'm sure this is a well-known fact, so I apologize for straying into unoriginal territory. But at the time, it was mandated that material that was played was recorded specifically for the radio, in terms of that sort of material. So that means if they are recording something which they know is going to be broadcast again and again and again, like, you want to make sure you nail it in terms of the musicality of it. But the sacrifice from that is that there's very little spontaneity in this performance. It's very musically competent, but the life isn't really there. For all the version that's on the Hollywood Bowl album, it's really kind of sloppy and whatever, but they're clearly having a blast playing it. It's quite hard to listen to because of the screams, but they're still clearly having a lot of fun knocking this song out, even though it's a bit all over the place. Whereas the BBC is the inverse of that. It's very competent, but there's just not that much life to it. But I suspect the fact that it's for the BBC, that it's going to be something which can get trotted out at any point, would be more likely to put them on their game in terms of like being professional musicians. But something gets lost in translation.
Okay, so they weren't necessarily recording it for one of the specials that they did.
No, I think one of them was for a special. I think one of them was for Top Gear, brackets, not that one, close brackets.
Yeah.
And so they recorded it twice for the BBC. But yeah, it's an interesting little thing that for whatever reason, like the energy just doesn't come across there.
Okay, so I wonder if that's then a musicians' union requirement as well, because the musicians' union was pretty strong. Even into, I think, late 70s, early 80s, especially with things like Top of the Pops. I think there was that element that things had to be recorded especially for
exactly
Top of the Pops as well. Okay, all right, fair enough. Yeah,
exactly the same thing.
Yeah. I obviously I've got something to add here. That My Love Doesn't Bring Me Presents. She gives them to other gents.
That's okay. That's still not as bad.
that works. That works. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. Yeah. Okay. There's a recent cover that I want to mention. Actually, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna sort of go back to, I think, 1971 for the first one, because it has a very specific Beatles reference.
Go for it.
And then I'll come forward to 91, and then I'll come forward to March of this year. The Move. Okay, so Birmingham's finest, The Move, and this is The Move. Not that long after to Jeff Lynne has joined, and it's a BBC session with I think Jeff Lynne singing. Now, if anyone's listened to more than a couple of episodes of this, they'll know that ELO and Pink Floyd are, in my personal view, two bands that don't necessarily deserve the legacy that they have managed to acquire, shall we say. Well, on this one, I'm going to back off slightly because it's pretty good. And what's I think is really good about it is the fact that, unlike so many other covers that you hear of this song, they don't try and replicate the choppy guitar. And instead, what we've got is this really sort of loud, distorted, but upfront bass sound that is driving the riff instead. And as a result, it's different and it works. The only place where it doesn't is in that sort of lighter tone of the middle eight, where they just don't bother with the distorted bass because it doesn't work with that particular tone. So that one I thought was good because we like to find ones that are perhaps doing something slightly different. And
Yes.
it's nice to be able to say, well, you know what, Jeff, okay, there are some things here that work. And obviously Jeff Lynne, Beatles, sure, knock yourself out with the links. Although we still don't know if he's involved in the upcoming impending
AI assisted, yes. No, I don't.
No,
I haven't heard anything about the
yeah.
production of that.
Obviously, dear listener, when he says AI assisted, he is aware of all the caveats, and it's not actually
Yes.
blah blah blah. It's not doing that. It's not bad AI. It's just Anyway, sorry. Don't write in your single figures complaining. But there you go. Anyway, sorry, you were saying.
Well, yeah. We don't know. I think at this point who's going to be producing it. I'm hoping the answer will be Giles Martin, not Jeff Lynne. But we'll see. We'll see. It'll be interesting to find out where it goes. But I kind of agree with you on that cover by The Move. It is nice to have that version there because a lot of the cover versions are very much kind of down the line recreations of what it is. And one of the odd exceptions, which isn't, is Dreadful, which is the Jeff Beck version.
Do you know what? I didn't even bother listening to it
It's absolutely dire.
I pretty much thought I knew what I would be getting with it, which is, I know, the wrong thing to say, but what's so dire about it?
Its existence, but I suppose up and beyond that, it's got an incredibly long, wanky guitar solo all over it, which is not great. It sounds like it belongs in a tape being played in a 1970s quickie mart. It's so banal. Oh, and lest we forget, the vocals are vocorded.
Oh wow, okay, and that's not the first thing that sprung to mind in terms of its awfulness.
I wanted to hold that back, so I had a build,
Okay.
like there's a lot of things that, okay, right, well, the production is really sterile, the guitar solo is pointless and wanky, but the big climax is the vocoded lyric, and it's so bad.
Now,
it's just so bad.
We should, of course, say Jeff Beck, I think, will come up on the in memoriam for 2023, and many regard him as one of the most virtuoso of all guitar players, and so on and so forth. But it just happens that I don't like that virtuoso guitar solo. Let's play as many notes as quickly as we can in a short space of time as possible, and see if the audience loves it kind of guitar playing. It doesn't, he clearly had a good enough career with lots and lots of people who adored him, and a wonderful life, and that's wonderful. Doesn't necessarily mean that I have to like it too.
No, I think we're sort of along similar lines here. That kind of sort of virtuosity for its own sake doesn't really do much for me. Like, he's clearly an amazing guitarist. He's clearly a very talented individual. I wouldn't want to suggest otherwise.
But it's all about the song.
it's not for me. It's just not for me. Well, and the thing is I think a lot of the song, as far as this is concerned, like, good musicians can still do bad cover versions. Cough, Paul McCartney, Kisses in the Bottom, cough.
Mr. Moonlight.
Oh, I see. I was trying to go for something that wasn't just Mr. Moonlight. Like, that's always our point of reference, and that's fine. But yeah, all right, fine, Mr. Moonlight. Yeah, yeah, it's just a really bad cover version. So yeah.
Okay, so I'll then give you one that on the surface sounds really bad, and then actually doesn't turn out to be quite as bad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 1991, Scritti Politti and Shabba Ranks.
It's a curious combination, right? It's not not one I was aware of prior to researching this episode, I must admit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are bits.
We suffer for this podcast,
No. It's fine. It's fine. There are parts of it. My brother quite liked Scritti Politti, so I did listen to a fair bit of their sort of soul pop, era growing up. But I was always aware of the fact that they had this sort of pseudo-Marxist version of the band. But then doing a little bit of reading about it, you can see why them doing a cover. I mean, forget the whole Shabba Ranks thing. It's just, it makes no sense whatsoever. But it does make sense because apparently he had absolute massive panic attack at some point in, I think, late 70s, early 80s, and took several months off from the band. And during that time, he revisited that whole thing and thought, well, actually, do you know what? We shouldn't be involved in these discussions of, material dialecticism and so on and so forth. We should just make really, really good pop music. And he revisited some of the things that he really loved. For example, soul and early Beatles. So you can then sort of see that, over the next 10 years, why he would have got around to doing something like this. I mean, it begs the question, as you might ask for a lot of these covers, why this particular Beatles song? But the thing I think for me that makes it really interesting is that if you know anything about Green Gartside, you know that he does not have a power pop voice. His voice is actually quite soft, and therefore to have someone like that singing this song makes it really interesting. And it's perfectly fine. It's got very kind of De La Soul type video with all those sort of swirly green and reds and yellows in the background. And
of its time, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, but it's just another way of looking at it and thinking, oh, okay, right. So it's interesting to see what someone can do. It can have that sort of very poppy kind of hip hop type feel to it and sort of work. And it does sort of work, even if my original reaction looking here at my notes is just a simple OMG exclamation mark.
A valid reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, that works. Have you got any other covers before I get onto my recent one?
No, keep time traveling. I want to know where you're going with this. Okay,
so this is from a Yola Tango gig in March of this year, where they're actually joined on stage by Wilco. For the encore, and for this particular encore they do 4 covers, one of which is a Dylan song and another one that I'll mention in a minute, but the first one is She's a Woman, and it's just really odd as to why they would pick it as a Beatles fan. I'm sure you'd want to pick something that is not necessarily obvious. You're not going to do Strawberry Fields Forever unless you've got a strong vision of how you're going to do it. And unless you're Oasis, you're probably not going to do I Am the Walrus. You're going to pick something where you can create a discussion about it. Oh, that's interesting. They're doing that, but also something that's fun to play. And I suppose this is the fun to play. And of course, in all of these, at no point do they change the rhyme. At no point does, for example, someone go, my love don't bring me presents, this leads to arguments. No one does that.
And that's a loss for the world.
It's a loss for the world. You think, why are you not doing this? But then what you've got is 2 bands on stage, and it's not a particularly big stage. It looks like it's a theatre gig, I think maybe in Chicago. The second verse is sung by Jeff Tweedy, of Wilco, and I'm going to be scrupulously fair here. The vocals are dreadful. Now I'm being scrupulously fair here because I suppose in his defence they're dreadful because you can't really hear them. It's one of those things where this man is clearly singing into a microphone, and yet nothing is coming back from the microphone. It's almost as though roadies have rushed on stage, put an extra microphone on because they know that someone's coming out, but they've not bothered to sound check it, so they don't know how much is going to come out. And so what you have then is just basically some guys playing some instruments and some vocals that you can't really hear. And yet actually lots and lots of news articles in various blogs, websites, music type online publications have recorded about, oh yeah, this gig where they did all these covers, and right, okay, have any of you actually watched the video? Because it's not that good. It's really not that good. You've got two bands there who I like a lot, and this is really not very good. The last cover, by the way, was sung by Yola Tengo's drummer Georgia Hubley, and it's okay, but it's a cover of Who Knows Where the Time Goes, which is an amazing Fairport Convention song. And this is another one. I've started listening to a bit of Fairport Convention recently, which has sort of slightly surprised me. And there are some songs that are just absolutely beautiful, really amazing. But the thing is, I don't know why you would take on a song that Sandy Denny sang, who is just an amazing singer. And yeah, you can sing a bit and it's perfectly fine. But then Sandy Denny sung it. But actually looking at it, quite a lot of people have sung that song. It's almost as though it's kind of like the converse to the fun song. Hey, let's pick a fun and slightly obscure song by band we know. Let's pick something that is a really, really well-known song by a really, really well-known singer. Because then maybe some of that will rub off. And if I can sing it quite well, that makes me a good singer too. I don't know. But it's sort of, with someone like Sandy Denny, maybe sort of see also Jeff Buckley. I think, okay, right, well, why would you do a song that someone like that has sung? But CF everybody who's then done I mean, I know his was a cover as well, but anyone who's sung Hallelujah in the last 30 years, I think, Jeff Buckley's done it. Don't bother. Seriously, there's no point. Don't bother. It's been done as good as is possibly going to be done, both by Leonard Cohen with his version in his own distinct way, and Jeff Buckley because he's Jeff Buckley. Don't bother.
Yeah. Well, would you think that applies to She's a Woman? Do you think this is the Beatles version is the best version of that song that there can be?
Apologies to JG who's got to edit those noises. I don't know. I think that's only one I can reply with noises, and I think because it's a fun song, I think you can do it in and have fun, sort of a little bit like a school band maybe thinking they're edgy by doing a cover of Helter Skelter and just kind of shouting out the lyrics. You can sort of be quite effective because it's not virtuoso, so you can bring something to it and do something with it. I think when you've got something that is, I don't want to use the word definitive because definitive is just rubbish. It's something that cannot be definitive, etc., etc. It's something that is just really good and exceptionally proficient. You're on a hiding to nothing unless you're doing something particularly different. But I think with She's a Woman, you can have fun with it as long as your microphones are on.
Yeah, that's usually one of the important considerations. I'm not going to be able to find any way of disagreeing with you on that. I'm curious about one sort of last thing that I want to ask you as well, which is you've mentioned in the podcast before that you're not necessarily the biggest fan of like Paul McCartney going like full belter vocals, and that's pretty much exactly what he does in this, and that's all he does in this.
I don't think he does though. I don't think he does. I think there is a bit where he's not screeching. I mean, I think this in terms of vocal performance is maybe up a notch from I Saw Her Standing There, but it's nowhere near as full on as Kansas City, Hey Hey, for example. I don't know, I just pluck one off the way. I was trying to avoid saying Helter Skelter again. I mean, it's not completely out there. I think there's an element of control in. So no, the voice doesn't particularly bother me on this. I think it is, shall we say, appropriate for the song. I'm sure if he were to update it and update the lyrics, so for example to "My love don't bring me presents like Supreme Court Justice dissents," then he would put a lot more emotion into it because he would be getting across his view about the current right wing majority in the US Supreme Court, and that's obviously going to be something that frustrates someone like Sir Paul. But I don't think he quite does that here.
No, that's
Yeah,
it. I mean,
that's fine. That's fine. Yeah,
you're correct.
but
That's
worth
not a thing he
but
does.
but worth getting in there. Yeah. So um, I'm I'm all out on this now. I mean, I do have another couple of My Love Don't Bring Me Presents, but I can't remember which ones I've done so far, so I don't know which ones I've got left to do.
Okay, right. Well, before we run the risk of falling into repetition, then let's score this old thing. What do you want to give it?
6.
6.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. A lot of fun, crap lyrics, but if I'm not going to mark down, you can't do that on the basis of the whacking great misogyny, then I'm not going to score it too harshly on the basis of one particularly awful rhyme. Even though if you go on the otherwise excellent Beatles Bible website and you look at the comments, you see that some people have decided that this is the most horrific thing anyone's ever done precisely because of that rhyme. It's just one moment. Well, actually, no, it is repeated at least once.
Yeah, it's not one moment. One moment would be fine.
Move on. Get on with it. Anyway,
good. I'm gonna give it 6 as well. I think it's a perfectly respectable song. That's about as far as I'm prepared to go with it.
dear Beatles, you were perfectly respectable.
Kind regards, Gigi. Yeah, no, that'll do. Right, good. Let us leave this one where it is. You can really get a hold of us. You can contact us by email. We are BeatlesStuffology@gmail.com. We're on Twitter @Beatles_ology. And you can find my blog at www.jgmcquarrie.scot. And you can read Andrew's writing at www.stuffology.co.uk. Please also check out my other podcast because we really, really need listeners. That would be Talking Trek to You, where a noob and an expert go through the original Star Trek episode by episode. Please like, rate, and review us on whatever podcatcher you are using so that other people can find the show. Next episode, we move on to the 4th album. So it's time for Beatles for Sale and No Reply. And as always, we hope you're going to join us for it. But until then, keep listening.